Next, definition of international banking. In this section, we will present many terms or many definitions related to international banking, but first, we need to focus on that international banking is the process related to imports and exports and operating trade finance and international currency and international clients. All in all included as international banking business. So what about the characteristics that distinguish the international banks from domestic? In this case, we talk about the type of loans or deposits and the investments. So all we talk about the international level. What about activities for international banking? We can classify activities provided by international banks into two main categories. Number one, traditional foreign banks, in this case, any transactions with non-resident in national currency. In this case, talk about traditional form of international banking. Euro currency banking, in this case, we talk about the wholesale foreign exchange transactions with resident and non-resident. Another term, in this case, when we talk about international banking versus multinational banking. International banking versus multinational banking. In general, multinational banking related to FDI, foreign direct investment. And in this case, talk about the ownership percent and what about the establishment process and the operation and the foreign branches, subsidiaries. All in all, we talk about multinational banking. So it's very important when we talk about the ownership and what about the control and management of operation in case of multinational banking. But the international bank model, in this case, talk about banks operate out of the home market in other country or other financial center to conduct the cross-border business. So multinational, if the bank classified as a multinational, this bank provide banking services in domestic market plus foreign market. International bank model, when the bank provides services abroad only, not in domestic market. Another distinguish between two terminologies when we talk about the global banks and international banks. Okay, global banks, we can classify any bank as a global when provide banking services in many countries in all continents. In this is talk about global bank, like this bank provides services in Africa, in Asia, in America, in all continents in the world. But international banks, when the bank provides services in some countries and some continents, not all, some countries and some continents. So we can classify bank as international if it has branches or subsidiaries overseas, and we will discover the differences between branches and subsidiaries and conduct business in international currency or foreign currency, and when we talk about international clients. But domestic bank, no, we talk about the providing of banking services only on the mother country or the headquarters. This case study, when we talk about Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, as we presented in the last chapters, this bank classified as top 1 or ranked as number 1 based on Tier 1 capital. So this bank will talk about market capitalization with $250.4 billion, and in this case talk about large bank in the world. The history of international banks. Mainly we talk about some points of view that argued that we talk about 400 years, over 400 years. This is the first or the origin of international banking. Another views, we talk about the history started with the century number 15, when we talk about the Medici family, and we talk about subsidiaries and foreign branches in other areas to facilitate trade and scientific and military and products. But in general, we can classify the history of international banking into two main waves. Two main waves. Wave number one, the colonial banking. Colonial banking first, the colonial equal strong relationship between large country, this is we can classify it as a mother country, and small countries. Strong relationship related to import, export, markets, and in this case talk about political and economic dominance between the large country and small countries. In this wave, or the first wave, we talk about the bridge banks. The bridge banks, this is the leader model in this case, with other Europe model like Belgium, France, and Germany. So in this case, talk about two different models started during the 19th century. Actually, when we talk about 1830. So what about British banks model or Anglo-foreign banks model? In this case, we talk about this model adapt the international banking model. So the British banks provide services out of UK based on subsidiaries or branches. But Europe banks, in this case, other Europe banks like Belgium, like France, like Germany, adapted or implement the multinational model. So provide banking services in domestic market and foreign market. The second wave, modern international banking. This is the second wave in international banking. So in this case, we talk about this wave. We talk about decline in the banking, on the British banking model, okay? And we talk about critical time in the history, like we talk about World War I, World War II. We talk about Great Recession, and we talk about high risk. We talk about uncertainty. We talk about nationalization. Nationalization convert the ownership from foreign to national. So talk about critical time in the history of the world. What about the beginning? In this case, we talk about the first stage in wave number two. In the first stage in wave number two started from 1950. In this case, talk about the expanded for US banks, or enlargement and or expansion of US banks. In this case, talk about the US banks suffered from problems in domestic market. Actually, when we talk about Regulation Q equal limits and restrictions by federal bank in the banks provided or provide services in the US, like heavy reserve requirements, like limitation on the interest rate. So the US banks try to establish subsidiaries and branches out of USA, mainly in London. So in this case, we talk about, based on Regulation Q, the US bank expansion abroad and provide the banking service, and this is the birth of euro dollar. This action or this event, the birth of euro dollar, equal the American dollars invested abroad or out of USA. So this is the first stage in wave number two. The second stage, we talk about the time from 1970s to the 1980s. In this case, talk about expansion for Japanese banks. And in this case, talk about the growth of Japanese multinational corporates. but started from 1990s. In this case, we talk about decline in Japanese banks and comeback for Euro banks. Comeback for Euro banks.